Hi, I'm Lee Adams, and I'm here to talk about Hügel culture on the moon and with Metabolic Studio. We have completed a number of Hügels in the last few years, and we have different stories with each Hügel. Hügel culture is a practice of creating a mound, the word Hügel in German, and culture, which we all know. So Hügel culture is mound culture. I'm sitting on top of a Hügel, but because it's built on the banks of the LA River, the historic banks of the river, it's submerged. It's covered over with floodplain, which is one of our experiments. So we have built from the ground up, layering logs, green waste, manure, and other nitrogen-rich and carbon-rich materials. And as those mature and ripen in place, we have a fertile growing space. This is our first experiment with the Hügel and floodplain, and we're anxious to see how it's going to work out. But we have, right here is an elderberry tree, one of the medicinal plants of the LA River. It's medicinal, it's a food source, and we're trying to replicate some of the indigenous practices that cared for this land for so long. So when we think about Hügel culture, my first introduction to it was through fallen trees and noticing that things grow not where the tree fell from, but where it fell to. So the tree is giving something back. Number one, from my source and growing place in the Mojave Desert, it was giving shade. A massive forest fire came through my property and burned it to the ground. What wasn't burned was bulldozed by the state in order to bring giant bulldozers in and stop the fire from moving up towards Big Bear. It was devastating. It was like a Tim Burton post-apocalypse scene. My beautiful, pristine desert was burned to a crisp and nothing but charred stems and trunks in place. Manzanita, willow, juniper, pinyon pine, they all burned. Joshua trees, cactus, everything burned. Well, what can you do? It's my land. I cared for it. I was bringing a child into the world. So I went out and I kicked down everything I could bring down with the force of my legs. And after that baby was born and was about 2 months old and I could put him in a backpack, I went back and I cut down what I was unable to kick down. And I arranged those logs and branches and debris around where each plant had stood. Kind of a monument, an apology to the earth for what we've done to it. And then I had another child and built a cabin. We went out every weekend, and 13 years passed. I flew out one day with a friend, and as we flew over the property, I said, "Oh no, this is the wrong place. This can't be. This is green. Someone is farming here in the middle of the desert." And the pilot said, "No, Lee, that's your place." And I couldn't believe it. Why is my place green in the middle of the desert where everything is burnt out? Well, reverse engineer. Those logs, those branches, that debris that I'd piled around each tree, I created patterns, and those patterns trapped the blowing debris in a windstorm. It trapped moisture and helped it to infiltrate. And my little piece of the desert came back as an oasis years ahead of the return of the rest of the desert. So, how can I do that in the city? And I began building Hügels. I am immensely grateful for the opportunity to build Hügels with Farmlab at Metabolic Studio and on the moon. We have pushed the limits. We have tried different materials. We have one Hügel that is built primarily out of junk, of old clothes, all carbon-based sources. And it's absolutely beautiful and rich. The environment, it smells good, it feels good, and it's covered with birds and butterflies. In addition to that, the collateral advantage, if you will, the grace gifted upon surrounding plants by the moisture and nutrients in the Hügel are tangible. At the studio, we have a vine called Pete's Vine, and Pete's Vine had been there for many years, just hanging on. But after the Hügel went in, Pete's Vine began to flourish. It lurched up the side of the building. The sound of bird song was amazing. And we realized how many pollinators were also attracted to that vine. That's the abundance of a Hügel. So we built some on the roof in planter boxes, and that started something wonderful in covering the building with vines. Lauren's visions are an absolute delight to fulfill, and we see it happening. Driving here, I can see the vines growing up the side of the building and covering the rigid concrete structure, taking away those sharp right angles and substituting a flow of green and life and abundance. So what we're sitting on is the 70-foot Hügel. We have the Yeti Hügel, which was an experiment in applying water. We have the Baker Street Hügel, which is a thriving community of rabbits, squirrels, and native plants on a brownfield. And as it supports those life forms, it's also bioremediating the soil below. It's very gratifying to see that happen. We have the Baker Street Hügel, which is our Hügel that contains a lot of discarded materials, old furniture, clothes, and that is also a habitat extraordinaire. Here on the moon, we have the 70-foot Hügel, we have the Yeti Hügel. We just keep pushing the limits. We're putting Hügels in boxes, which reduces the amount of soil we need and optimizes our use of water and inputs. We're happy Hügeling together. This is fun.